How is everyone? You all right? It's good, Phil. Thank you. Right. I understand that the kids are in tonight, but I really feel that the message that I want to bring is important. I've had probably 5 or 6 incidents this week where I've been confronted with somebody who has been asking questions about situations in their life that has really kind of been connected to what I've already had on my heart to bring tonight. And you know that kind of sense when you just know that something's stirring in you and that something's just right. And I believe that if we can really grasp the implications of what I'm going to speak about tonight brings, I really believe that there'll be a whole change in the way that humanity operates. So I really just ask tonight that you open up your ears, you open up your heart, and you allow yourself to hear beyond that which sometimes the brain wants to figure out. It's true, isn't it, Simon? Yeah. Sometimes we try and allow this to do all the thinking. Allow your heart to open up and really take on board and allow to almost see beyond that which is being said to grasp a greater meaning of really what Christ was trying to get us to be as people. And that's where I want to take you tonight. Right, there's 2 things one thing actually I'd like to say before I start, and that is you might hear me using 2 words tonight. That is consciousness and unconsciousness. All of you know what those words mean. However, in the context of me speaking tonight, it's not going to be like, when you have to call an ambulance out to sort of like get somebody breathing again and wake them up, can you hear me? Although to some degree it kind of is. But when I'm speaking about it tonight, whenever I say consciousness, I'm referring to someone being aware, an awareness, right? So if you hear me say consciousness, I'm basically meaning awareness. If you hear me say unconsciousness, it basically means the opposite, to be not aware. Yeah, so when I say you are unconscious, I'm not saying that you're kind of like on the floor with your eyes closed. I basically mean it's to do with a lack of awareness. So don't be confused by those words. Right. How many of you would agree that the greatest teachers of religion, whether it be Jesus, Buddha, whoever, all came with one thing in mind, and that was to ultimately transform people? Do we agree? Are we on the same page? It was about transformation. Romans 12 verse 2 says this: do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now let me ask you a question. Did Jesus succeed in getting people to transform their minds? It would be a touchy subject to talk about, wouldn't it? Because you could say that he was left by himself on a cross, and really people didn't get the point, did they? They ended up turning their backs from him. So you could say, actually, he didn't really fully succeed in getting people to understand that this needed transforming. How many times was he hitting his head against a brick wall because people just wouldn't really listen to that which was actually trying to get people to understand? Now, my question to you tonight is, are we any more willing tonight to be transformed than they were back then? Because sometimes it's almost like we forget that the same Christ exists now. It's almost like we live in this past tense that, the Jesus of the Bible, no. The Jesus of the Bible is the Jesus of now. He still comes into your life now, posing the same challenges and questions now. The question is, are we going to respond with any different attitude to that which we read? And the answer would be it's entirely up to you. Now, the only way humanity will ever truly be transformed is if we deal with this one word, and I believe that this is at the core of what we need to deal with, and it's this: ego. Who's heard of the word? You've all heard of it, yeah? Okay. Now, we all have one. Let's just start that out from the get-go. We all have an ego. Now, that will already pose a challenge to some of you, which, if you just bear with me, you'll understand what it really means. Now, the ego is not just when somebody or something tries to make itself bigger, better, more superior. Because we have this thing in society that we believe an ego is only manifest when someone's trying to show off, or when someone's trying to be clever, or when someone's trying to prove a point, or when someone's trying to say, look what I have. When actually, and hear me now, It can actually be the flip side of the coin. An ego can be manifest in someone who's sat whimpering about how worthless they are, how insecure they are, how much of a victim they are. It's a double-sided message. And that word ego, I need you to get out of your head that it is just to do with pride. It is to do with pride, but it's not to do with just this kind of superiority thing. It is a flip side of the coin, so keep that in your mind. Now, the Hindus call it Maya, or Maya, and that word means the veil of illusion. The Buddhists call it dukkha. Ego means unsatisfactoriness. Just a few words to throw out. Now, I thought, when I read them, I thought, okay, so, like, in Christianity then, like, what would we kind of think of the ego being? So I thought, well, we could say it's original sin. Like, it is actually the root of the word sin. And I found another meaning for the word sin, which was this: to literally miss the point of human existence. Isn't that fab? Some of you need to get that as well, that with this word sin, often we've misinterpreted. To simply miss the point of human existence. If you're taking notes, I'd get that down. So, back in Eden, you could say that Eve felt she was somehow lacking, that something just was missing in her life. The tree of life that she was eating from, all of a sudden, it was like it wasn't like enough anymore. So what did she do? She decided to take of the tree because it was desirable to the eye, because ultimately the end goal would be that she would what? Gain knowledge. She would, for the first time, know what it was to think. And there, right there, is where the problem started. Now, she thought that having that knowledge was ultimately going to make her life much more successful, much more peaceful, almost like much more meaningful. And yet, even just from where it goes after whatever verse that is in Genesis, it's not pretty really, is it? You just get a bunch of stories of people who, from that moment on, are all about knowledge and about how you do stuff. And it just all really got very messed up. Reason being, she felt that she could save herself by her own effort and achievement, became unsatisfied with simply eating from the source, because quite frankly, that's just dull. And I think all of us can feel like that sometime. Why is it we often try and attain or attach to things? Is because the suchness of life seems just too dull, doesn't it? And I'm hoping tonight we can realize that actually it's not at all. People have become so caught up in self that they have just lost total connection with the whole picture. That is why people are so unsettled and unhappy with life. Let me read you a scripture in Jeremiah 9, verse 23. It says this. Have we got it? Yeah, I think it's the same version. Let not the wise boast of their wisdom, or the strong boast of their strength, or the rich boast of their riches, but let the one who boasts boast about this, that they have the understanding to know me. I'm not going to talk too much about that, just let that sit. If we're going to boast, he says that they have an understanding to know me. Me being Abba, Father, which we'll get onto in a bit. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I want you to be very honest with yourself when you see these. Here's the first question. Is your sense of self bound up in the things that you possess? Just think for a second. Is your sense of self bound up in the things that you possess? Number two, do certain things give you a subtle feeling of importance or superiority? These are good questions, yeah? Really delve deep into yourself and be honest, yeah? Next question. Does a lack, and here's the flip side, does a lack of these things make you feel inferior to those who appear to have more than you? So we've gone from, do you need stuff to feel superior, to, does a lack of them make you feel inferior? Number four, do you mention things you own or show off to increase your sense of worth in someone else's eyes or your own? Again, good question. Number five, do you feel resentful and angry and somehow lacking when you see someone with more or you have lost a prized possession? I would probably say that each of us can find a little bit of us in each one of those, I would say, if you're really willing to kind of look at your whole life. So what I want to do tonight, in the short time that I've got, is clarify what the ego is, why we struggle with it so much, and ultimately how we can lay it down in order to be transformed to our original state and ultimately bring heaven to earth. That's my goal, okay? So we've got to ask the question first, what is the ego? This is where we need to start. Ego is no more than this. When my I identifies with form, thoughts, stuff, or labels. When my I identifies with form, thoughts, stuff, labels. Let me put it this way. Your you, so you're Jenny, you're Claire, you're Vicky, your you has to find an identity with something. So your I has to be attached to something to feel like you are an I. Sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? Do you get what I mean, though? Yeah? Now, the problem with that is often those things we attach to or those thoughts that we have, we regard as absolutely the truth. It's like, yes, I'm connected to this. This is the total truth of who I am, whatever. Yeah? Now, the issue with regarding it as total truth and not allowing any budge in what we feel and what we've attached to is when somebody then questions or challenges that thing, what happens? Don't look at me like that. Come on now. It's not pretty, is it? Whether you react in an angry way or you cry but inside you feel like you've been violated, don't you? It's like, whoa, you've overstepped the mark now, boundaries and all. Now, let me give you an example. I am a successful businessman. Okay? Someone then challenges the way you run your business. Here's the problem. If I am a successful businessman, put together, when someone then questions the way you run your business, who do you feel like they're challenging? Thank you, Claire. You. You feel like they are challenging your I. Is this clear? When actually, they're not at all. They are simply challenging the thing that you are connected to. But they're not actually challenging your I. Because remember, I has to be connected to something. So therefore, this sounds a bit like technical, but bear with me. So at the end of the day, you feel that when they pose that question, they are actually violating you. One of the biggest egos that exists is within the church. The church is an institution. And some of you know, you might be from very religious backgrounds. I'm from one as well. The only reason why we got free is because it hit us head in the face and we had to deal with it all, because if we didn't find an answer, we were stuffed, basically. So, we've come to a real revelation of who the real Jesus is. Now, the reason why the church struggles with it is the absolute truth. Its I is connected. Would I be right in saying that? So why then is it that the church becomes so defensive? It's because its identity is caught up in what it thinks, what it believes, and its religion. It's quite simple, really, isn't it? I'm going to even pose this question. Now, this might really mess your head up. I'm going to say it anyway. It's in red, because I was thinking, do I say it or do I not? I am a Christian. Do I dare go here? I am a Christian. Is everybody starting to understand where I'm coming from now? I am a Christian. Your I am has attached to an identity of Christian. So therefore, in effect, Christianity becomes a form and a structure. Then wonder why people get so messed up. Because they're not actually living as an I at all. They're living attached to something. I even challenge you tonight. Christianity is a wonderful thing if it's not something that we literally give our whole self to and identify with, because you will totally lose who you are Am I all right in saying that? Are you hearing what I'm saying? Yeah? I am not saying that Christianity is wrong. I'm not. I am saying that if we connect with it as an identity, we can still end up just as messed up as we can with anything else. You only have to look at the way the Pharisees reacted to Jesus to see that their eye was connected with dogma, structure, all the other stuff, because they nearly lost the plot when Jesus tried to challenge them. Now, here's the issue. The same thing was happening with Jesus and the Pharisees as what happens when we were challenging the businessman a little bit ago. He wasn't challenging them as people. He was challenging their ego. He was saying, whoa, you are identifying with something here that is completely out of whack, and you need to either transform yourself to listen to what I'm saying, or you're going to end up in exactly the same mess as Eve did, ruled by knowledge, ruled by right and wrong, to the point at which your head's going to explode. And it's not going to work for you. A bit like what it said earlier on, this sense of veil of illusion, unsatisfactoriness. He's saying you're going to live an unsatisfactory life if you don't understand what I'm telling you. The ego is not you. Get that in your head. The ego is not you. It is an imposter pretending to be you. Now, this is where it gets very scary, because you're like, oh, well, how do I know, like, who's talking, and is it me, or is it like, It takes away your awareness of the whole and your connection to the source. What sort of world does this create for you and the people around us? It's a question to ask. So, why is the ego such an issue? One of the reasons why I think all of us struggle often with the ego, this imposter that we allow to ultimately take resident in our lives, is because mystery is now taught as something to be feared. Like, if you think of it, everything has got to just be like, just labeled so we can, our small little minds can like understand, oh yes, because I get that now, life's great. Really? Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't sound right, does it? Through science, we now know everything. I was talking to Connie the other day. When she had Riley, I knew how it was made. It's like, did it at school, watched it on TV, watched programs, know the whole birthing process. It's like, okay, yeah, it's a baby. Lovely. And then that I'm not being rude, and I said this very honestly to Connie. It was like, because you know how it all works, when this little gorgeous thing enters the world, you're not like, oh, how on earth does it happen? I even said, when you walk outside and look at it's like when Jesus was saying, consider the flowers, they just be. Like when we look at a flower, do we look at it and think, okay, Mum does, she does. She's like, oh, look at it, or whatever. It's like, when we look at a flower, for example, we don't think, how on earth has that got to be that color? Why is the things that grow out of it, like lilies, like the things that, why is it that, why is it dusty? Why do like certain insects why does it smell like it does? Do you understand what I mean? Because science now tells us why. So to some degree, from the very beginning, who we are and everything is about thought, about being connected to stuff and knowing. So you're already at a loss from the start, really. Kids, they're taught what success is and what failure is. If we don't make something of ourselves, we then become depressed. And we find just as much security in depression as we do if we're a success. So you see, it's all about, well, at least I can identify with depression. At least I can identify with my business. It's all about what we connect to. If we don't attach ourselves to something, though, who are we? Think of it. If you were to say now, I'm not attached to anything, who are you? Now, this is where it gets frightening, because it's like, well, I don't really know. I'd have to be honest. I don't know. But I'm hoping you're going to tell me, because that's why we come to the rock. Listen to how silly this sounds, though, right? Listen, okay. Your whole life, right, and its identity is made up of a set of vowels and a group of consonants. The Oxford Dictionary tells you who you are. Would I not be right? I mean, and it's funny, because you think a word which we attach to will have so many vowels and so many consonants, and your whole life is dictated to by that. We're not right in the head. We're not. Be transformed. We struggle so much because we allow ourselves to be a word from a dictionary. It's scary. So let's have a look a little bit at the core of the ego. I haven't said, is this making sense? I've just said it now. I'm quite proud of myself. That's the ego talking, by the way. More often than not, when we say I, it is your ego talking. Now, this is where it gets started. Whenever you say I, more often than not, it's not you, it's actually your ego. It is attached mostly to upbringing and the conditioning of how, things were in your family, etc., etc. And usually, like that video, Beth, that you picked was just brilliant, because it's always attached to memories and past. Like what did they say? Thought is attached to past, but heart is attached to present. And you'll see where I'm going with that in a minute. So we identify with those memories, ultimately pick a word from the dictionary and make it us. And we then make it us and our story. That is the sum total of who we are. Now, let me just say this here. The ego is neither right nor wrong. So I don't want you panicking and thinking, oh my word, I'm really struggling with this and I'm just wrong. No. It's neither right nor wrong. It is simply, and here's the first time I'm going to use the word, unconscious. The ego is not aware. It's unconscious, right? And I'll develop that in a minute. It's unconscious to what truly is, and it can only survive on the reality of the true essence of a person, not seeing that it exists. So I could pose the conclusion now and say, basically, the greatest threshold to freedom is simply seeing that your ego exists. Once you see it, we're already literally there. And I'm hoping that you'll grasp this. So remember, it's neither right nor wrong. I don't want you going away panicking, because after this will be a conclusion to this, hopefully. might take me till 1 a.m, but we'll definitely get there. Right. So let me explain some manifestations of the ego, so simply kind of how we would see it working. The ego equates being with having something to identify with. We often then really think, I have, therefore I am. Blow it out of the water, it's not true. I have does not equal I am. You hear sometimes people saying, I don't have enough. What they're actually saying is, I am not enough. Yeah? All the wrong way of thinking. Here's a few words, and these are probably the biggest expressions of when you know that the ego is operating in your life. Comparisons. Anybody compare sometimes? Definitely. It can tick me off on that one. Complaining. Whoa, can tick me off on that one as well. Resentment. Yep, and again. Reactivity. Most certainly big tick. Grievances. Yeah. Taking things personally. Yeah. Being right, making others wrong. Yeah. Gossiping. Yeah. Making judgments. No. Yeah. Are all egoic manifestations, because it is connected to what you are thinking. And it enhances and protects our identity. Has anybody got mad when they're on the roads driving a car? You're all so quiet. Please be honest with me. Thank you. My Lord. Right. Doesn't it feel fantastic when you just get it out of your system? Sometimes words can't express what I feel, and it's just like a quiet, yeah? It's like Connie was saying earlier that, she has to bite her tongue, because she doesn't want to use inappropriate words in front of Riley, so she just pulls her face, and she said if ever a camera was to take a picture of what she looked like, it would be very, very funny. But it's true, isn't it? Now, what did I just say earlier? A manifestation of the ego Reaction. How quickly do we react when you're cut off in a car and they think that they've done it right and they don't even know how much irritation that caused you? How quickly do we react? Like that. It's like a flash, like a millisecond. Did you know that when you're reacting to that other person who's cut you up in the car, it is your ego clashing with his ego? He thinks he's right, you think you're right, whoop-de-doo, where do we go from here? Two egos, boom. So neither of you are right or wrong, you're just both full of yourselves. Is that not true? Yeah. When I say full of yourselves, I am including yourselves with me in there as well, all right? Now, the only way we can overcome this, and some of you might want to use the illustration of road rage, because it, you know, I mean, when I say road rage, I mean, like, you know, when we get irritated with things on the road, because it is something that we can see quite clearly when it happens. The only way you're going to overcome these reactions and all this stuff that I said before is by recognizing that the ego in yourself and in others is not personal. Remember, it's an imposter. It's not personal. When we see ego, hear me on this, rather than seeing it as the person living in an unconscious state of awareness, we make it who they are. So when a driver cuts you up, do you go, bless, you know, he got really mad with me, but he's just totally unaware of really who he is. I mean, that is unconsciousness in its raw form. I mean, bless his heart, it's not him. Really, I mean, honestly. I do that, though. I do that all the time. Thank you, Jesus. Oh. Oh, dear. When we realize that nothing that comes from the ego is personal, there is no longer a compulsion to act as if it were. 1 Corinthians 8 verse 2 says this, those who think they know something do not yet know as they ought to know. Luke 23:34 says this, Father, forgive them, for they when you get the revelation of that, that is incredible. The reason Jesus could stand and overlook your sin, was because more often than not, and I'm going to say all the time, your sin is not you. Your sin comes because you are unwilling to embrace who you actually are. If God, at core, is in all of us, how can he disown himself? The thing he wants to get rid of is the fake you who's trying to act as if it's you but actually isn't you. So he can say, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. He knew it wasn't them who was making the wrong choices. It was actually their attachments to stuff because they preferred that because it felt more safe, more graspable. Is that even a word, Jenny? Graspable. Go with it. Who cares? Now, the greatest protection against these clashes and the issue of ego is consciousness, awareness. A person can only ever become an enemy when you personalize their behavior. Hear that. A person can only ever become an enemy when their behavior becomes personal to you. There are no enemies if nothing's personal. And I think that's something we all need to learn at as a community. Nothing that we do to each other in here should be personal. We should be looking beyond it to try and build a strength that is from the essence of who we are. This is why Jesus could befriend the sinner. He saw beyond it. Now listen to this. Non-reaction, think of you back in the car again, non-reaction is not weakness, but strength. You can challenge and confront, but not from a place of being right or from you trying to uphold your ego. It has to be the real you with no connections, no attachments, wanting to bring out the real them. It can never be from ego to ego because it will never, ever work. You look through the ego to the essence of the real being. So what is awareness? What is consciousness? What is the real you? Because this is the question we need to ask. Philippians 2 verse 3 in the Message says this. I'm not far off. Here we go. Yeah. Think of yourselves the way Christ Jesus thought of himself. He had equal status with God, but didn't think so much of himself that he had to cling to the advantages of that status no matter what. Not at all. When the time came, he set aside the privileges of deity and took on the status of a slave. What does it say? He became human. Having become human, read the next bit. Louder. He stayed human. There's your problem right there. We don't like being human. We either want to be an animal and run around like a crazy lunatic and just do whatever the heck we want to do. Basically instinct. Yeah. Or we want to be, I don't think angels do this, but we want to be angelic. We want to be above. That's what we were created to be. And yet, that's the contradiction. It says, didn't it say that God made humans higher than the angels? This is what is all very confusing. We actually want to be bigger than that which we were created to be. That's why Eve slipped up. She wasn't enough just being. The real you is human. You're all like, whoa, that's great news. So ask yourself the question, who am I? You're all going to go, oh, you just said human, it's human, it's human. Who am I? If you're living in unconsciousness, a state of unawareness, the only thing you will be able to think of is a heap of stuff. I am a consultant for a whatever. I am a mother of 2 children. I am a wife to my husband. I am this, that, and the other. You will believe that that is you because you are not yet aware of the essence that's within. The real you, human, is not attached to anything. It is simply the joy of being. Human and staying human is simply the joy of being. Remember what that video said? Heart is in the present, thoughts are in the past. Being is a now thing. So therefore, if you're still thinking, you ain't being. Remember, humans are meant to be. I love what Ted Hansen says, we're not human doings, we're human beings. Great point. Like Jeremiah says, when we live in that beingness, you start to understand your source. Remember what Jeremiah said at the beginning? Understand to know me. Exodus 3 verse 14 says this, I am that I am. You've all heard of the story of the burning bush, Moses. He says, who is it? And the bush talks and says, I am that I am. I'd just be like, what the heck is that supposed to mean? Can you clarify? So consciousness and awareness is when you live in a state of I amness. I know you like that word, don't you? I amness. This is where human being happens. Most of us can't live in this because we are always looking for the present moment to deliver something that defines us rather than seeing that perfection exists all around us. Listen to this. Nothing you can know about you is you. You're all like, remember, it's all connected to thought, identity. Nothing you can know about you is actually you. Because if it can be labeled, then you're not being. Because to label it means you have to think back, and you're not actually living now. You can go and listen to it online. It's all right, honestly. That's what Jesus meant when he said, a peace that surpasses understanding. He knew that you can't think peace. Peace cannot be thought. Peace is in being. Peace is not rooted in I amness or I am that. It is simply, I am. This is where you experience the goodness of the presence of God. So, let me ask you a question. I'm nearly there. Thank you for being so patient. Will you become less if you let go of your ego? Will you become less? Here's your answer. Yes, you will. Some of you didn't want me to say that, did you? No, because God's love will shower in and whatever. Yes, it will. But yeah, you will actually become less. But if we just take the time, remember that thing of non-reaction, to actually really look inside of us, you'll start to truly realize what Jesus meant when he said, the lesser among you will become great. There's something about when you get outside of your own head and allow yourself to be less. I really believe that that's where being is. I really do. You can only feel it when you stop thinking. Being must be felt, it can never be thought. When you fully accept the loss of ego, your I am, your true essence will emerge. And that true essence is that identity that God originally had planned, you being at one with him in the garden, eating from Christ, which was the tree of life. That's where we should be residing. Are you all with me? Let me pose this challenge to you, or tell you. You are not the ego. So when you become aware of it, smile. Smile. It's exciting. When you think, hang on a sec, I've identified here with being depressed, smile at yourself and say, oh, but if I've seen that I'm feeling depressed, then something else has actually seen it, which means there's more. You know, if you tell yourself, oh yeah, I was a bit full of myself there and I was a bit arrogant, smile. It's not you. You're on the threshold of being. I'm sorry I'm getting excited now, but I think it's quite cool. When you become aware of it, it's not showing you who you are, and it's not showing you all that stuff. It's basically showing you what you're not. I've got a word for you. My notness. I amness and my notness. Remember those two words, my notness. Yeah? So, we should know who I am, in essence, feeding from the tree of life, and we also should know what we're not. And what we aren't is all of those attachments that we have to think about. Is that making sense? Good. So listen, if the ego is who you are not, then what can be lost? Absolutely zilch. Let that sink in a second. If the ego is not you, all that you've made to be your life story, if that is not you, then the diminishment of it means you lose nothing because it's not you. Bingo. And yet we're terrified most of the time. Oh, but if I go back to the source, then who am I? I can't say I am this and I amness. Ooh, don't like that word. So we'd rather cling to it when actually, don't tell me you feel happy in it. Because it eats you alive. The more knowledge you have and the more you're in your head, the more you will feel distressed with life. Because you are never going to find freedom in that place. Remember, peace comes this and start living here. This is where presence lies. This is encouraging. And I hope you're all grasping this because it's really freeing. It says in Matthew 18 verse 3, it says this, unless you change and become like little children, you will never see the kingdom of heaven. What does that mean? And we all know, for those of you who haven't been with us or your guest, the kingdom of heaven is not about going to a place, it's about establishing a realm, and I believe it's this sense of I amness. I believe the kingdom of heaven is I amness. Right here, right now, in this very second, as you live. Why did he refer to this little child? If you watch how children operate, they haven't yet identified fully with form and stuff. It's like they be. It's like, if someone says something, well, it was just, they said it. What do you do? Let's move on to the next thing. They don't then think, you've just said that, thought attachment, ego, yeah, got to defend it. They don't think like that. And that's what Jesus was saying is, the kingdom of heaven is entered because this little child understands what it really means to live in this I amness. Now, Connie said rightfully the other day when I was speaking to her, she's already starting to see snippets now of Riley starting to identify with things because she can see he's processing thought and making choices on those thoughts. And she said it's like you can see how quickly these things are birthed. And it's quite scary. And again, I'm not a parent, but for anybody who is, do more focusing on being and allowing your family to be than creating so many rigid rules and regulations. I was brought up in a household where it was demanded of everything. I mean, no wonder I've struggled with my ego, because it's like, talk about being identified with, this has got to be right, this has got to be right. If everything doesn't fit just the right form, then you failed all this. It's not a good place to be. Allow family to be, allow community to be, because that's really where the truth and the essence of being human is. Right, nearly good. One last point. Right, allowing the ego to die. So how do we let it die? When someone criticizes you, blames you, or judges you, or whatever it may be, this is what you're going to do. Nothing. You're going to stand and do nothing. Is that so? You've heard Chris preach about that, the is that so? Stand and do nothing. This is what I feel Jesus meant when he talked about denying yourself or turning the other cheek. That sense of not going with what you feel is the right response, almost going totally the opposite way. You do nothing. You don't even respond in a nice way. You just do nothing for a second. Embrace that feeling of nothingness for a second. It will feel totally alien to you. At that moment, you feel like you've shrunk. But in fact, you're expanding at the same time. You realize nothing has been lost, and in that moment, you embrace the essence of what it means to be and be human. The ego will only die, firstly, if its existence is recognized. If you are content to be nobody, content not to stand out, you go back to Eden. At one with the tree of life, free from knowledge of good and bad, we boast no longer in our ego, but we boast of our understanding of his I am within us. And that's the message. There you go. I really hope that's made some sense to you. And I understand that, and I've run over, I feel really bad. And thank you, kids, for being so amazing. If there's any kids in here, they might have all run away. You can understand why I needed to lay out the whole picture. I think, if it had been a bit bitty, I didn't want you to go away thinking, oh, well, he said that now, Just one last thing. Jesus says this: the meek shall inherit the earth. What he basically said was the egoless shall inherit the earth. What does it mean to inherit the earth? He was in effect saying that all of this around you is yours. The whole earth belongs to you. Embrace every single bit of it, but only if you start getting out of yourself and living within the reality of who he is. So I want to challenge you tonight. Are we really willing to start recognizing the ego in ourselves? I honestly can almost prophesy that now this has kind of been spoken, you will all of a sudden start to realize things that you never realized before. I had an amazing conversation with Connie on Thursday. And within 5 minutes of the discussion, she went, oh, that's ego. Like that's not, that I can see it. And you become aware that it's like, there's something not right here. There's a clash, there's a conflict. So try and be aware of it. Try and come to some sort of truth within yourself. And remember that there is nothing wrong with embracing just you as a being. You are everything you need to be. Live in that reality and love life because it's fantastic. So I bless you all. If you're hungry, go and eat. And if you've got any questions, please do come and see one of the leaders, me, Jenny, Danny, Beth, whoever. But lots of love, and we'll see you for the film on Wednesday. All right, take care, guys.